Hey, everybody. It's HelSec time. I'm James Arlen. Everybody who knows me calls me Jamie. And this is why I quit security for a while and came back. Mostly storytelling. Hope you like it. Brief version. I end up having to talk a lot about myself to get through this. So, hi, this is my bio. You can read it just as well as I can. I've been doing security stuff for a long time. Right now, however, I'm the CISO and head of technical operations for North America for Ivan, which means technically I work in Finland. You can tell from the sunlight outside, I am physically located just outside of Toronto in Canada. If we go back a little bit to February 2019, I had reached the end of my ability to cope with the security industry. I gave up. I quit. After 25 years of doing security, I just quit. But for you to really understand how I got to the point of walking away from my entire career, you need to hear kind of the beginning of the story. A little bit of retrospective. This does sound a whole lot like when I was a boy kind of conversations. This is where the fact that I'm a grandfather really shows. Back in 1994, I was a student. I was working in film and television. I thought that was going to be my career. I skipped away from that, went into accounting and auditing. My father was an accountant. I thought maybe he would decide to like me if I did the same thing that he did. I was wrong. That's not how that worked out. By 97, I got sick of accounting and auditing and said, why not start an internet service provider? Sure, we can do that. I taught myself Cisco iOS over the course of a weekend and spent a lot of time doing things like TIS Firewall Toolkit and setting up WAN connections and VPN connections for companies. 2001, it all kind of exploded. The dot bomb happened and I found myself jobless for 3 days, I think, and then got hired to work as a security architect. Interestingly enough, for the same telco that was responsible for causing the ISP to go out of business. Did some security architecture work, did a lot of consulting, did every job from LogMonkey all the way through to, in 2006, the first time I was a CISO. I'd sort of professionally reached the title point. And then I had to round it out. What do you do after that? Well, you go and become a speaker. So for a few years, I was a black hat DEF CON speaker, other kinds of speaker. Became a black hat trainer. I helped develop the Cloud Security Alliance guidance materials and the CCSK. I talked a lot, way too much, actually. Did some podcasting, spent a lot of time as a consultant. And in 2017, I thought that I was going to have, the security job. I didn't really realize that at the time I joined, it was going to be the last security job, I thought. The best way to sort of describe the career progression over that period is I followed traditions. Many of us just follow the traditions. I chose 2 out of the 3 religions in security. I don't have any of the SANS certifications, but I have a CISA and a CRISC, and I have a CISSP, which I got on a bet. That's a really interesting story I'll tell at some point, but not now. And to be a part of that tradition, you had to follow some pretty simple rules. The first rule is blinky lights and shiny things will always save you. Antivirus, web application firewalls, IDS, IPS, anything that you could buy from a vendor would definitely fix all of your security problems. It was also a real requirement that you had to always say no. If somebody in the organization came and said, hey, I'd like to try out this thing, your response had to be no. It's too dangerous. It's not safe. Your password must be 14 characters long, upper, lower, numbers, and symbols. And it was always adversarial. It was always red team versus blue team. and it grated on me. This whole being a participant in these traditions, it was getting harder and harder as I went along, because as much as I do truly enjoy the some aspects of the work, and I definitely appreciate, and I'm very lucky to be employed, we weren't moving the bar, not meaningfully. We were doing a whole lot of the same thing kind of over and over again. It was getting a little bit painful. And like I said, in 2017, I went for the I went for the job in the AS, as a service. I joined a company that that rhymes with just bought Slack, and specifically worked in their division that rhymes with Maruku. You might have heard of it. And I was doing security. I was an individual contributor. I didn't have anybody that was reporting to me. I was just doing security, solving those problems at hyperscale. That particular platform as a service is pretty large, like 11 million applications, 3 million databases. It's pretty big, very purple. And I worked to solve those problems. And that was great for about 4 or 5 weeks. And then they figured out that I can manage people. And when they figured that out, they put me in charge of staff, and I started doing security in a very traditional way. In fact, that organization, the parent, the one that rhymes with just bought Slack, is very traditional. And it left me in this condition of being constrained, and everything was difficult. The tiniest things were a political fight or a battle where you had to spend hours and hours in meetings saying the same words over and over and over again. And a lot of it was just survival, right? To maintain this job, you had to do the wrong thing for the right reasons. The doing the best thing for the customers, doing the best thing for the stakeholders, meant you had to do some things that are pretty awful, actually. Really, really repetitive, very procedure heavy. Put in your request and wait 3 days for the SLA. It was really not great. It left me spending a lot of time screaming to myself, loudly, really loudly in a couple of cases. One of the advantages of working from home, of course, is during the middle of the day, it's just you and the dog. The dog gets a little scared when you scream a lot, but it works out all right. And it got harder and harder, and it turned into no, like where you back away from it all, and you're just no, I can't. And I had a few options. One of the hard parts in life is when you've got a job and they give you a set of golden handcuffs. At that company, the golden handcuffs are pretty good. It's publicly traded stock. It vests over 4 years. They show you the balance that you're due, and it just sits there. It's like, wow, that'd be great. Thinking about what that money is going to look like when it's fully vested and sitting in your bank account instead of sitting in E-Trade. So I can just accept that this is my life. I just show up in the morning, punch the card, do the work, punch the card at the end of the day, and walk away, not care about it, not have to live it. Lots of jobs in security definitely have this, well, air quotes, problem. The lack of talent in the field is such that generally employers are just, here, take my money, and I'm throwing cash at you, and take it and do your job. So I could just suck it up. But this would involve having to die a little on the inside. I've had such passion for working in security, and I've gotten so many so many things done. It's been so satisfying. Um, Giving that up, having to die inside, would have been pretty awful. My real option was go and look for a new job, and that's a little daunting. Going and looking for a new job is often work, and you've got to make a bunch of decisions, and you have to figure out, is this going to work better for me, or is this going to work worse for me compared to what I've got now? And I ended up going with look for a new job. And the new job that found me was engineering management. And you sort of think, wait a minute, engineering management. How do you go from security to engineering? In what way are you qualified? And the people that were drawing me across in an internal transfer were saying, we think you can do the job. Why don't you just come and do the job? And that imposter syndrome that sometimes haunts us kept saying, no, I'm not actually qualified for that. Not really. And then they got more specific and they said production engineering management. And different organizations use different words for when they mean production engineering, technical operations or SRE or production engineering, which in my case meant keep all of the production running. This entire hyperscale organization, it's on you. You run the team, you keep it up and running. You've got a fair amount of freedom. And the real benefit from my perspective was ops is interesting. We're all in one way or another kind of adrenaline junkies. That's part of working in information security is, what's the next thing that's going to happen? How many people got super excited to start learning that SolarWinds is a company that's got a lot more than just one product, and you might have it, you might not. Ops had that excitement. It gave me a singular focus. Keep production up and running. Production quality counts. It had real elements of do things in an efficient way and streamline, make things just easy, because you've got very large product engineering teams that are building products and got this huge customer base and they're all doing stuff, and it's on you to make it all happen in a glossy kind of perfect way. A huge emphasis on doing things once and automating away your pain. And I compare that to so much of my life in the security industry, which was do the same thing over again, expecting a different result. How many times do we have to go through a class of vulnerability? It's 2019 at this point, and we're still dealing with SQL injection. Like, we've known about this for years, 20 years, and we could do something about it if we chose to, but we don't. We just accept it. And we don't automate our way out of problems. Not really. There's companies that sell security automation software, and we talk about that's the future of this, but we don't actually do a whole lot of it. There's really good procedural adherence in ops. Everything's got a checklist, and the fun work is always all around the edges. It's finding those places where something needs to get done and doing it. And ops is very forward deployed. You're right on the edge of everything. Whatever is happening in the organization, you're right there. This has a lot of the same excitement that was the fun part, or the good part of information security. So that's interesting. I'm actually very intrigued by that. What does the opportunity set look like? Well, the opportunities are pretty cool. Really diverse team. When I was managing in information security, I've had continent spanning teams before, but this would be my first global team. So I'd have team in Europe and in North America and in Australia, and it's a very diverse team, talents from both ends of the spectrum. Super senior architect level engineers, all the way down to junior people who are just out of school. I got to manage all the common services. So all those things that organizations take for granted, in the same way that they would take for granted things like the firewall's there and it's running. They take for granted NTP is there and it's running, DNS is there and it's running, and I get to run all of that stuff. Logging, that's cool. A couple hundred terabytes a day of logging. That's a problem to deal with, isn't it? I got to be in charge of process governance. So if there was a process that needed to be tweaked or needed to be fixed, I got to fix it. I got to work across the organization. I wasn't just sort of confined to my team. I got to do all these things with product teams and with marketing and with sales and all over the place. I had these real challenges, product challenges and customer success challenges, and it pushed me. Some of you that are starting out, you're accustomed to being pushed every single day. By the time you're in the old fart group, you don't do a whole lot of learning and growing. A lot of it is, yep, seen that before. You run into a problem where they've got a threads versus workers thing that's not working out, and you look at the engineers and they're just encountering this for the first time in their lives, and you're like, when I was a kid back in 2003 and Apache switched their worker thread model around, we had to deal with that, and being old and grumpy, it's entertaining for a while, but getting back to learning and growing, that's kind of amazing. It turns out that I learned just one thing, one tiny little thing, and that started this period of time that I spent working in engineering. I learned AIC. It turns out that production engineering is AIC. Some of you are sitting back going, gee, man, would you skip to the next point? What the heck is AIC? And it was like a light bulb moment. It was truly amazing. Availability, integrity, and confidentiality. The light bulb was bright at that point. It turns out that production engineering is security engineering. It's the same thing. It's just not in the order that you're accustomed to. We spend all of our time in security blathering on about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And that holy triad, it's a part of all of the religions, super big deal. It's not always correct. In a lot of cases, the order does matter, and production engineering, it's just availability first, integrity second, and confidentiality if you get around to it. It's not really a concern of production engineering. The system has to be up and running, and it has to be doing what it's supposed to do. Well, these are the things that I loved from security, and I can do them, but in a different context where I'm empowered in a different way. I'm not driven by, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt kind of thing that happens so often in the security world. I'm able to focus and be driven by it has to work because there's people that need it to work. And I could just sit back and just enjoy that. It works. My team keeps it up and running. Things break. We have incidents, and incidents happen. But it turned out after a few years of figuring out that I hated security. I was working in consulting and I was hating being a consultant. I had to go out and deal with customers and find the next job and manage people and statements of work, and I switched into what I thought was going to be an individual contributor job for a while and do some security work, and it was so traditional and dogmatic, and I hated that. But it turns out that I didn't hate security. What I really hated was the tradition, doing all of these things in this prescribed way. Why do we do things this way? It's the way we do things, and that's not effective, not on the long haul. And I did it for a while. I spent about 18 months running production engineering for a fairly large platform as a service, and I realized that I was ready to go back to security. But there was no way I could go back to security in that organization. I didn't burn any bridges. Also, never burn bridges. But I couldn't do things the traditional way. There wasn't room for me to do that to myself. And so I made a selfish decision. I made the selfish decision to say this had to be on my terms. And the things that ended up on the list, this might look a little familiar, are the things that drew me into production engineering. I needed to have that diverse team, lots of opinions, people outside of the traditional security world. I needed to have some management over stuff, whatever it was. I had to have that connection to the engineering part of the organization. I'd have a lot of insight into process and governing that to make sure that the process works the way that it's supposed to. Turns out you need that for auditability and compliance reasons, but being able to control it instead of just point at it and say your process is broken. I wanted to work with all different parts of the organization. I wanted that same challenge of dealing with product things, dealing with customer success things. I wanted to be forced to learn and grow, and I needed help to get there. I needed to get out of the company that rhymes with just bought Slack. So what would I do differently? I had this opportunity. What was I going to do about it? And it turned out that I was going to do just 3 things so far. Ask me again in a year and I might have a different answer, but 3 things. No single purpose security tooling. The security product industry is so much vaporware, so many promises that are never fulfilled, so much snake oil, it's kind of crazy. You go and you walk around the business hall at a big conference and you talk to the vendors and they'll promise you anything. You can say, give me this magical bean that I can grow into a beanstalk and go find the giant, and they'll try and give you a magical bean. But it's a potato and it doesn't do what you want it to do. So no more single purpose security tooling. Operational tooling can be used for security purposes, and it's almost always better because you're not the only constituent, which means you're not the only one stuck running it. You have other people to help with that. Do you need a specialized security event handler? Sometimes it'd be nice, but having really good alarms and alerts in your operational logging system turns out to be valuable because everybody needs that. Your ops team needs really good alarms and really good alerts in the same way that you do as a security person. So no more single purpose tooling unless it absolutely can't be avoided. And then you do just enough. You have to remember that every piece of technology that you bring into your organization expands your threat surface, sometimes expands your threat surface in huge ways. And you need to be able to pull back on that. You need to be able to make that a problem that fits inside of your ability to cope. Right. So if I'm going to bring in technology for operational purpose and a very, very similar technology that has, a special little gold star and the word security next to it, I'm doubling up that amount of threat that I'm bringing into my organization. I need to pick one, and I need to be the right kind of selfish, and I need to put the emphasis on operational tooling. So that was the first thing that was on the you must list. And the next thing was that I was going to cast off the fashion. There's lots of fashionable security things. There's a new buzzword every time you turn around. I think we're in sort of the waning months of the zero trust buzzword, but I wasn't going to manage by buzzword. I was going to put myself in a position where I would have to deal with senior management and talk to board members, and I was going to have to do that interpretation between what business people read about in the news and what security people sit and stare at their belly buttons and ponder at conferences and events. And I need to bridge that gap with the real parts of things, which are, not running in circles and screaming and shouting, but rather saying things like this week, for example, um, we've been working hard on doing our supplier security assessment stuff, making sure that our supply chain is secure end to end. We're going to accept the risk that we can't protect against a nation state level actor, and we probably can't detect them either. The idea of a preventative control and a detective control, we might not be able to detect them. Certainly, some of our suppliers aren't going to be able to detect them either. SolarWinds didn't detect that they were under attack. Mandiant and FireEye didn't detect that they were under attack. And these are people who should be able to do this stuff for real. And so instead of focusing on the fashion, I'm going to focus on doing the real work first and best. This conversation about supply chain security turns into, yeah, we should bump the priority of that. We're already doing it, but we need to do that work to a better extent, or we need to pay attention to that in a way that puts it first, because we've got to answer to the people who pay us and say, yep, I understand that that's important and I'm going to take care of it. DevSecOps is super buzzwordy. And buzzwords are kind of a variation on that tradition thing, and it certainly doesn't tell the whole story. In fact, DevOps itself is mostly broken. I mean, Gene Kim tried really hard at the Phoenix project, and people still don't understand what it means. The Google SRE book was mostly propaganda and didn't really try very hard, but we're sort of lost in the meaning of what this is. And what it turns into, from my perspective, and what I'm living every day at my new job, is it's everything sec everything. You need to bury security in the middle of all of the things, and you need to do it in a way that is welcoming and open, and help people understand that we're all relying on each other. This is a cooperative function. This is not the kind of thing where we're telling you what to do or not do. We're going to invoke your self-interest, of course. At the corporate level, teaching people, phishing awareness, turns out that's useful to them at home, and that's something they can carry home and share with their families, preferably socially distant families. But everything sec everything is where we want to expend that effort, and I think that's the right thing to do. And ultimately, I wanted the opportunity to get things done, and getting things done is so fulfilling. And for so many of us in our security careers, it's been the story of the infinite everlasting backlog. And I don't want to live with an interesting everlasting backlog. I want to look at the completed column on the Kanban board and see that I did stuff. And the only way that I'm going to be able to do that is to not be traditional, to not sit back and say, well, security says, but rather to take an operational view. And I was lucky enough to find an organization that thought this is a good idea. And so that's what I'm doing with my time. And I would encourage all of you to think deep thoughts about how you can do less security and do more operations with a tiny bit of security flavor to it, and spread that message well beyond the kinds of teams that we work with individually, and stop making it this separate thing. Security is built into everything. We should just do it, and we should do it together. And I see there's a bunch of questions that have popped up, and I'm at the thank you. Make sure you have a great holiday. Be safe. If you're in a country like I am that's super affected, wear your freaking mask and stay away from other people. Thanks so much. Questions?
Thank you very much, Jamie. That was an awesome talk. We enjoyed that.
Thank you.
So we have a few questions for you.
Yep.
Let me see. So you were talking about the CISP certification.
Mhm.
Here's a question: CISP on a bet. How would that come about?
That was a great moment in time. So I've been friends with, one of the things that happens when you spend time on the speaker circuit is you end up friends with a lot of people. And I was friends with a bunch of the members of the board at ISC Squared. And there's sort of this constant low level whining that the CISSP isn't relevant, that all it really represents is an HR filter. And in a lot of ways, people who say that aren't wrong. And I, at that point, didn't have a CISSP. I was, maybe not a conscientious objector, but I wasn't working towards it because I didn't need it. And so I made a bet with the board members. I said, for everybody who questions the value of the CISSP, a lot of the responses are coming back saying CISSPs don't actually know what they're doing, which means we're not testing for the things that matter. And I said to them, look, I'm going to walk in cold, no studying, no looking at the syllabus or the requirements or any piece of paper from ISC Squared. I'm just going to walk in to the testing center. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to write the test, and we'll see what happens. And in my head, I'm thinking, okay, if I can walk in and write this test and pass effortlessly, then I either know what I'm doing or the test is too simple. And because of my imposter syndrome, I'm pretty sure I don't know what I'm doing. So we're going to go with the test is too simple. If I walk in to write it and I can't pass it, that also tells me something. It says you're not testing for the right things, or my imposter syndrome is correct. And maybe I should just never talk to anyone ever again. So either way, we're going to get an interesting response. And so I walked in and wrote the test. And it took me about 45 minutes. It's supposed to take like 4 hours. And the testing center wouldn't let me leave until an hour and a half had gone by. So I wrote for 45 minutes and I sat for 45 minutes. And I scored really well, 96, 97%, something like that. There were a couple of questions that were effectively trick questions, and I made the point about that when I was talking to them, but I got my CISP on a bet. And so if you're one of those people who got your CISSP after about the middle of 2015, you had a much harder test than people who took it in prior to the middle of 2015. So on the one hand, you're welcome, and on the other hand, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think they changed it like 2 times because I made it after the 2015, the CISSP, and before it was changed again. So there was like 2 changes in the test.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a interesting story. Thank you very much about that. It was fun. So second question, what is your opinion on paper security, aka governance and frameworks versus more agile approaches?
So there's a good phrase that I was taught at one point that I've carried with me for years and years. And that's sometimes you have to eat your vegetables. And in a lot of ways, that's a good way to describe governance, especially governance as it relates to compliance standards that haven't caught up. If you think back, it's been quite some time since NIST updated their password guidance and said, yeah, it turns out we were wrong. Complex passwords are stupid. But we haven't seen that update flow through, right? PCI hasn't changed. ISO 27001 hasn't changed. Like the engineering side of the industry knows that it's stupid. The mathematicians have always known it was stupid. But the implementation side is not working out. And so it turns into, like I said, this function that feels a lot like just eat your vegetables. You got to do it because kind of for the same reason that I got my CISSP, right? It fulfills a checkbox, and you don't have to like it, but what you can do is be a jerk. In a lot of ways, I'm a huge fan of being a jerk, mostly because it lets me giggle to myself afterward. But one of the best ways that you can approach it is to say, okay, you're going to make me do a stupid thing. All right, I'm going to do your stupid thing so well that you can't even comprehend your own stupid thing, and push towards being continuously auditable or continuously accessible. So you put in all the automation work so that the artifacts are created automatically. There's no fire drill that happens when audit shows up twice a year. You're always there. You've always got that material ready. You've always got a quick answer to their question. You've always got an elegant answer to their question. You spend a lot of time pushing back and saying, okay, this happens a lot in highly ephemeral cloud environments. I've had this discussion with auditors a lot of times. They're like, we want to review your system security, so we need you to provide us with a complete and up-to-date asset list. And they sit back smirking like, then there's no way you can do that. Nobody can do that. I'm like, yeah, we're entirely cloud-based here. EC2 describe instances, millions of lines, right? And they do their selection, and they pick 25 machines out of the 100,000 machines that you're running. And you're like, yeah, we gave you that list 2 weeks ago. We recycle our machines every 7 days. Those computers don't exist anymore. There's nothing to go and check. Do you want to try this again when you understand what a cloud is? And so that element of any job that you're going to choose to do, really, really, really do it. Do it in a way that lets you take pride, right? The world is full of really crappy jobs. As a teenager, I probably had most of them. I pulled a rickshaw, and I painted houses, and I worked in kitchens, and even really terrible jobs like washing dishes in a restaurant. You can choose to do a crappy job of it and just sort of push your way through life, or you can choose to take joy in it and get it done. And me and a couple of guys I worked with, we sang Broadway tunes while we were cleaning the dishes. And we were proud of the fact that, it's funny to say it this way, you could eat off of any of those dishes. But some of the other people who worked there, if the dish came out not completely clean from the dishwasher, they put it on the shelf anyways. Maybe the waiter will notice before they hand it to a customer. You do that job in a way that makes you feel like, holy crap, I've accomplished this. So if you're thinking about it as paper security or sort of useless governance activities, instead turn it into, I can show you that we've done every damn thing that you wanted, and we've done it so well, you can't find anything to poke at. And then just watch the sad face of the auditor who can't find anything to yell at you for. That's a pleasant change. I'll do that. I'll do that all day long. It's lots of fun. And it works, as it turns out.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So next question, and the last one actually, before we go into the short break. What is one of your favorite operational tools that also is very beneficial security-wise?
There's a lot of answers to this one, but ultimately one of my favorites is OS Query and what is now called Fleet DM. There's this laundry list of tools that often those paper security compliance requirements include, like you need to have file integrity monitoring, and you need to have malicious file execution protection, and air quotes antivirus, which still doesn't do what it says it's supposed to do. You need to have all of these things, but it's also really interesting to be able to have operational awareness and the ability to use SQL-ish language to query all of the machines that you're responsible for and ask them questions on a regular basis, and turn that into alerts and logs. So you can do things like keep track of a machine that has its disk fill up. Having a disk that fills up over the course of 8 hours, that probably shouldn't happen. That's a thing. Is it a security thing or an operational thing? I don't know yet, but I'm going to go and check and find out. I'm going to keep an eye on the Etsy directory. No files in the Etsy directory should change once an ephemeral, immutable machine has started. So I'm going to turn file integrity monitoring on for that. And if it changes, I get an alert. Is that useful from a security perspective? Depends on the file. If Etsy shadow changes, yep, that's a security thing. If some obscure part of one of the running daemons changes, that's probably an operational concern. But when you show the operational value of a tool like that, and again, OS Query is the agent piece that runs on the computer, and Fleet DM is the central controller that runs. When you show the power of that to an operations team, they're like, "Oh, heck yeah, we want this, and we'll run it." And it's like, yes, I get more stuff done. I don't have to do it. Hey guys, can you run these 3 packs for me and just toss the alerts that follow to that back into the security queue, and we'll take care of it. It's a great operational tool, as long as you've got the logging and the alerting and all the other things that you need to have. But it's this great operational tool that has real security benefits right out of the box. You can even use it to do a pretty effective job of antivirus on Mac OS and Windows machines, even though it's not strictly antivirus. And it's got a much lower threat profile associated with it than allowing McAfee or Symantec into your life.
All right, perfect. Actually, one more question. We just got
Yeah.
it after the CISSP talk.
Mhm.
Which ISC2 certification is best for standard IT consultant?
Hmm.
Is it
That's a
CISSP?
that's a hard one. When you think about sort of what's happened with certifications over the last, I don't know, I got my first one 20 years ago. So what's happened over the last 20 years is it's turned into a filtering mechanism. And what I would suggest is that the CISSP has become the equivalent of, you must be this tall to ride at the amusement park, right? Like it's just saying you're good enough to get through the door. I don't think it's particularly complex. I don't think that it's particularly difficult either, compared to some other things like OSCP um, or any of the vendor air quotes certifications, like the AWS security specialist thing. Um, I think it's worth getting. I wouldn't pay for a boot camp for it. It's something that you can very effectively self-teach just with the materials that ISC Squared makes available. And ultimately, I think the right answer there, and different people have different opinions, but my opinion definitely is, um, if you're going for something like that, find someone who has it and ask them for help. So if you're working towards your CISSP or any certification, and you want to have a conversation about it, or here's things to think about, or what was my experience, I'm happy to talk to anybody about that. And I'm pretty sure that anyone who already has a certification is going to be in the same boat, right?
Yeah,
We know that we can help each other, and everybody gets better as a result.
yeah, that's true. Well, thank you very much, Jamie, for coming to
Awesome.
our meetup. It was a pleasure to have you, and we enjoyed your talk. And it will be available on YouTube later on, so
Woohoo!
we will post about it. So thank you very much. And
Thank
now a
you.
few minute break before it's Anna's turn to present. So stay tuned.